happened?
Oh,
Oh,
and my AirPods aren't working again. Oh boy.
okay.
We're live and we're not late, right?
This one might be debatable. In the past, on time. This one might be debatable.
Well, I'm just gonna. I think we should just gaslight our audience. You guys got to check your clocks because people keep saying that we're late, but my clock is saying that we are perfectly on time. So, frankly, I think you guys should just get a better clock.
We're running on Luke's standard time here.
Mm-hmm. Oh my. Well, today is an interesting day. I am really I'm it's kind of weird because right the big thing that we're talking about today is in 2 days time theoretically we could be getting event invitations.
Hmm.
That's crazy.
It's very exciting. It's been a little while since our last Apple event.
It's been well what when was it? October, what was it, second week?
Yeah, something like that. It's been a while.
Oh man, I'm just getting caught up here on a lot of the recent news that we've got going on. You guys hear about well, I guess we should maybe save that, but the foldable iPad thing, you hear about that?
I heard very vaguely about maybe a foldable iPhone, but I did not hear about the a foldable iPad. That I did not hear.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of like a foldable something or other. I guess we don't necessarily know which it would be.
Right. I don't know. It seems like that's where the industry has been heading, but I'll be very interested to see what Apple does with it.
I don't even know, man. This is going to be a really interesting couple of days here as we're in the lead up to uh the first Apple event of 2022, potentially getting some Macs. I mean, this is honestly kind of a quick timeline because um, traditionally March is kind of a nothing month. There's not a ton of stuff that goes down. Apple does often have March events, but usually in the past they've been sort of education or iPad focused.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of the last. Actually, okay, the last significant March event was probably 2015, the 12-inch MacBook. I'm pretty sure that was March, right?
Oh, I don't remember, but I trust you.
Yeah, March. Yeah, it was March something or other. March 9th. Interesting. That's one day
Hmm.
different. I guess the calendar wrapped back around after 7 years. Uh and we're back at basically the same time. So I guess, March 8th, God, that's really soon. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready for another Apple event.
Yeah, it's kind of. This month is so short. Like you think March 8th, and it seems like it's 2 weeks away, but it's more like a little over 1 week away.
Yeah. And also, as Jason pointed out here, holy crap, it's already March. Like, what?
Yeah.
When did that happen? It's okay. Is it just me, or does it feel like it really hasn't been a long time since the last Apple event? Like, I feel like I'm still like that feels really recent to me, even though I guess it was 5 months
Yeah, it
almost.
doesn't. it doesn't feel like it's been 5 months, and it doesn't like 2022, I don't know, it doesn't feel like now versus, like, January 1st, it feels
Feels
like
like
it could have been,
1
like, a
week.
week ago. Yeah,
Yeah, one
it's
very long
weird.
and weird week. Dude,
Yeah.
I had not thought. Wait, October. When in October was it? October Apple event. Has it really been almost 5 months? October 18th, November, December, January, February. Yeah, it's been like 4.5 months since. What?
Yeah.
That's dude. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it
Wow.
doesn't feel like, I don't know, because now I'm thinking about, like, the MacBook Pro, which was,
Yeah.
like, on the one hand, it feels like I've always had this thing, but then on the other hand, it still feels like pretty new. I don't know. It's just weird. I don't know. Time is weird.
Time is very weird. Ugh. I feel like time has been a complete blur and a mess since COVID.
Hmm.
Like from March of 2020, which by the way, 2 years of pandemic we're about to hit.
Oh boy.
It like everything just seems so weird. I feel like these 2 years have all been 1 year that just took twice as
Yeah.
long.
Yeah. It
I
feels really weird.
I don't like it. I don't like it. Like I'm always very like chronologically situated for so I don't know. I forget what the word is for it, but there's a word for when you have a visual image of mental things like time. I don't know if you have this, Noah, but I guess I could kind of describe it. I can't remember the name of this. Like, it's like a condition, not like a illness or you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yes, I know what you mean.
When I think about a calendar, it's a visual thing in my mind. And a lot of things have like colors assigned to them. Like for example, Sunday is a bright yellow color. Monday is like a deepish red. Tuesday is light blue. Wednesday is orange. Thursday is purple. Friday is sort of a sunshine yellow. And then Saturday is purple but darker. That
Talking about synesthesia.
that's the word. That's the word. Yeah. So yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh yeah, time being weird. Because I think about time in a visual and linear way. Like I can, if I imagine a calendar year, there's a model of it, a visual thing that I can see in my imagination. Same thing with, years. But 2020 to 2022 is just like it's like, all the other years are distinct and color coordinated, and then it's just like 2022.
Yeah,
It's
it
weird.
does. It feels weird. And I know we have to get started in a second here, but I want to ask you, this is kind of related to that. So like, so you
Yeah.
say that you see things in a visual way, or like you imagine things in a visual way, right? So like when
Mhm.
you close your eyes and think about something, do you actually see that thing, or do you just see black?
What do you mean by something?
I don't know. Close your eyes and like imagine something specific, anything specific. Like, do you actually see something?
Yeah. Not like with my eyes, more with my mind.
Yeah, I don't. The reason why I ask is because there was some like post or something that apparently there's some condition for like that describes people who like can't see things in their mind, and I think I might have some form of that, but like I
Oh,
thought it was just normal, so I honestly don't know. I have no idea.
gosh,
I just thought it was
brains
kind
are
of
weird.
interesting. Yeah, I don't, and you can't even like how do you describe it to other people, right? It's like hard
Yeah, no, I
to
can't describe
describe.
the sensation.
Yeah,
Oh god, brains are
I don't
weird.
know.
We should probably get started here, but
Yeah.
here's a shower thought for you, Noah. Your
Hmm.
brain knows where all of your organs are, but it won't tell you. And with that, let's get started. I'm going to start my recording.
Okay, I've got mine.
Welcome to Dark Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from two technology experts. And that's not just what we call ourselves, it's what our moms tell people when in 36 hours they might get an Apple event invitation. I'm your host, Luke Miani.
And I'm your host, Noah Rubin. On this show, we take questions from listeners, attempt to answer them to varying degrees of success, and maybe even have a laugh or two along the way.
And in today's episode, we have a really interesting scenario because if you're listening to this after we've streamed it live on YouTube, you might know more than we do. And specifically, if you're watching this or listening to this, let's say, oh, I don't know, Tuesday, March 1st at like 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you might be significantly more informed than us because, well, how about that, folks? We are potentially less than 48 hours away from invitations to the first Apple event of 2022. And I, for one, am pretty excited about that.
I definitely am too. It's been, we were talking about this a little bit in the pre show, but it's been almost 5 months
I can't get
between the
over that.
last event and this one. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I had genuinely not realized that until we talked about it, Noah. I thought I was in my mind. It's been 2 months for like 3 months. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know because like for me, yeah the same because like I knew it was in like I knew it was last year, and I'm like okay this
Mhm.
year it's been like about 2 months so far, which is kind of crazy on its own, but it's been like 2 months. So oh
True.
the event was probably like 2 months ago or something like that, but no, it was like
Exactly.
almost 5 months ago. It's weird.
No, that's the most weird thing, and it's weird because I guess it only seems recent in Apple terms. Like when I think about what I was doing with my life in October, I feel like it feels like a while ago. But my Apple calendar, I guess I was just, you know what it was, Noah? I know what it was.
Hmm.
It was that darn tech drought. We had two major tech droughts last year because you go back to November 2020, that was Apple Silicon event. Then we had December, January, February, March, 4 months. Crap, that's the same amount of time. Oh my god, my brain hurts. I can't do this. But it's like the same amount of oh, wow. This didn't feel wait. So why did this not feel like a tech drought? But last year when we had the April event, I was like, finally something's happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like maybe there's been more like general tech news or more like rumors or maybe other companies doing things recently versus back then, but I don't know if that's true.
And then let's see. So after okay, you know what? You know what definitely contributed to the tech droughtiness is I think a lot of people, we kind of reset our clock after the holidays. So
Hmm.
even though this was an October event, a lot of the coverage happened in November, and then I think a lot of people probably, don't work for all of December, and then it's sort of a big reset at January 1st. And so last year, starting from January 1st, it was April 20th or something like end of month 4 that we had our first anything from Apple. This year, we're now talking beginning of March. That's a month and a half earlier. So I guess that's fair enough, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, I feel like the holidays, like Thanksgiving and then, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever time, like yeah, that's kind of people are kind of doing other things and then beginning of the year, yeah, you kind of reset. I think that's a fair assessment.
And so the thing that the thing that really messed us up last year was Dub Dub. I feel like last year's WWDC was. Would you agree?
Yeah, what was it was mostly just like software, and it wasn't super like iOS 15, iPadOS 15, and like with the
Yeah.
other operating systems. It wasn't nothing like super cool. So yeah, I agree
And
with that.
also the fact that all of the cool features, FaceTime, SharePlay, universal control, all of the cool features got like pushed all the way back. Like, here's a crazy thing. They talked about universal control as a macOS Monterey feature, and it's barely going to be in Monterey by the time it comes out.
That's true.
Like
Yeah.
it, it it's still in developer beta, is it not?
I think I don't know. I actually haven't tried it out at all yet, but I
Me neither.
think I don't remember if it's been launched or not, but I feel like it might still be
We're
in
kind of
beta.
delinquent. The fact that we haven't tried it out yet, kind of
Yeah.
embarrassing.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's amazing. Um, the thing that happened last year, I think, was the tech drought of the summer, which, by the way, isn't like necessarily odd. Like Apple has done that in the past, but I guess last year it just felt like a real big crunch because it was June, like June 6th, I think was dub, and then we had July, August, September. Wait, that's 3 months. So wait, last year's tech drought, which felt like it was unending, was 3 months. And now, where it doesn't feel like a tech drought at all, was 5? What?
I don't
Time is a social construct.
yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
Oh my God. It was probably the chip shortage. That must have been it. Because it
Mm.
wasn't just in Apple news that stuff was quiet. It was like nothing was coming out. We were all just kind of waiting around, like, hey, what's going on? Although, as Barrett pointed out here, from April to September, there were no new products. That's a good point. So that's that is significant. That is significant.
Yeah, I think yeah, 'cause that's a little bit what I was getting at before with like I think, with that last tech drought, there was not much going on at all in the tech world as far as like new products because of the chip shortage. And even I feel like the news and like rumors and stuff, there was obviously some, but I feel like maybe not quite as much. But like
True.
now, Apple is preparing to launch stuff. And even before that, we've heard a lot of rumors about their upcoming plans and, the headset and all kinds of other things. And obviously other companies have been shipping stuff as well. So I think there's been more activity in the general area.
That is definitely true. I feel like the rumors. You know what's also weird? I think that last year everyone kind of turned on the rumors. Like Apple rumors, I feel like took a major hit last year in terms of people getting excited by them, believing them. I think it was mainly fueled by a couple of last minute course corrections that happened at Apple. So, to my knowledge, a lot of the leaks that were wrong last year, which by the way wasn't really that many, they were fairly accurate, were not wrong because the information was inaccurate. They were wrong because Apple changed their minds. And we've talked about that before. That's something that happens whenever there's a leak. You have to keep in mind that there's layers going on. It's Apple making a decision, then you have somebody informing the press about that, providing some information. But then the thing that often slips through the crack, there's an interpretation layer, whether it's John Prosser or Mark Gurman or Love to Dream or Dylan DKT. All of them are by necessity interpreting and then sharing information. There's certain things where it's like, okay, I don't know if I can actually draw a conclusion with that. There's certain things where you say, okay, that's pretty clear. It's, picture of a thing. I could say, this is a thing. So there's a lot that goes on there, and I think rightfully there were people that kind of criticized the idea of leaking. They're like, okay, well, if the stuff is wrong and it's like getting people's hopes up, and it's like, it doesn't actually happen, then I guess people kind of got annoyed with that. People got annoyed that it was like spoiler alerts basically for Apple events. My I guess my take on leaking, as on many things, has been a little bit less cynical. I'm not a super cynical person. I tend to be sort of optimistic. And um, whenever a leak happens, I try my best not to get swept up in it as a certainty, but as a fun little prediction. Because even the most information based leaks are ultimately predictions, because you're you're kind of going like, hey, is this legit enough that I think Apple's going to actually do this and not change their mind? So I really think that leaks. I think if you're getting completely sold on a product because of a leak, if you're saying like this is what it needs to be, like this is what has to happen, and you're like dead set on it, then you're kind of just going to set yourself up for failure. I always treat leaks as guesses, however informed, um, and more of like an analysis. I don't know if that's a more of a subjective thing, but I like to think of it as a little bit more casual and fun than some people do.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it because, like you said, at the end of the day, you don't know the facts. You don't know, even if you see something with your own eyes, you don't know that that's, what it's actually going to be. And people in the comments are talking a lot about, or people in the chat are talking a lot about the Apple Watch. And that was
Hmm.
a big one that I do
Yeah.
think that we're going to see that redesign this year, but obviously we didn't see it last year. And,
Hmm.
people who thought that was what was going to happen were obviously disappointed. Although, to be fair, I think the Apple Watch Series 7 was kind of disappointing on its
Yeah,
own. But I
I
do think that
agree.
we're going to get that redesign this year. I think that the leaks were accurate. They just Apple wasn't able to get it in time. I know we talked about this before,
Yeah.
but yeah.
And that's a really good point, actually, Noah, because when you talk about disappointment, a lot of the sentiment was, "Oh man, how could John Prosser do this and get us all hyped up for this Apple Watch, and then it was disappointing?" Do we not think that the Apple Watch Series 7 was already gonna be disappointing? Like, remove the leaks from the equation, completely ignore that those renders and those theories ever existed, and tell me that you would have been excited by the Apple Watch Series 7, a watch with the exact same internals as its predecessor, and whose only noticeable changes were a larger display, uh, a software keyboard, and new colors. Oh, and like stronger glass, I guess. That's
And slightly
it's
faster
not
charging.
John.
Can't forget
Oh,
about that.
ooh, you're right. That's
That's a
very
big
important.
one.
It's not John Prosser's fault that that's an underwhelming update. That's an underwhelming update,
Hmm.
leak or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and obviously the leaks got people hyped up for something better, but yeah, like you said,
True.
if that's what
True.
Apple was gonna release, then that's what they were gonna release, and I think you would have been disappointed either way.
Mhm.
Hopefully this year we'll get that redesign because I'm looking forward to that. Obviously not in
Oh, me
March,
too.
but I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it.
I mean, speaking of March, one thing that I've been struggling to wrap my head around is we keep seeing pretty comprehensive reports about essentially a new MacBook Pro in March. And I just don't really see that happening. Like I think we might have talked about this, but it just it doesn't really make sense to me for Apple to start talking about M2 now. I just don't see that happening. What do you think?
Yeah, because this was the 13-inch MacBook Pro that they were
Yeah.
supposedly gonna like give that an update, which I know we talked
Mhm.
about that a bit and kind of surprising that they were gonna go that route. But um, I do agree because you brought up the point, launching the M2 for some products, but still using M1 Pro and M1 Max. And like obviously, M1 Pro and M1 Max are going to be more powerful than the M2, but it's the marketing. That's all. It's the marketing. And if you see something with a 2 on it and you see something with a 1 on it, you're going to think that the thing with the 1 on it is older or last generation or whatever. So a weird it would be weird for Apple to use M2. It would also be kind of weird for them to put an M1 in it because we already have an M1 MacBook Pro, and they're not going
Mhm.
to do an M1 Pro in it, right? Because we have that in the 14-inch, and that's the
Yeah.
next level. So I don't know what they would do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of there being a MacBook Pro with M2 is a fairly reasonable one. I just think the timing, being in a week seems unlikely. I'm trying to find the report on it because I swear there was some story that the 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2 was gonna not be redesigned, and that just really was like, "What?" MacBook Pro 13 M2. Uh, I just don't get. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, here we go. Here we go. And so here's the reason why this is weird. It's because it came from the same guy who leaked the notch.
Hmm.
So already that's a solid MacBook Pro related track record, right? The notch was spot on, also was
Hmm.
moments before it came out. So the timeline is similar here. Um, the same person is saying Apple could unveil a 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro with unchanged design, so a touch bar, and they're saying that that's going to be. I'm trying to figure out if Mac Rumors is adding the March or if they added the March, which is interesting.
Hmm.
Um, okay, let me go through this here. Based on new information which Mac Rumors saw, the upcoming 13-inch MacBook Pro has the same design as the current version, including the touch bar, and will not have a notch or ProMotion display. W- but has an M2 chip. That is the strangest thing. And I don't see anywhere that that same source was also saying that it was going to launch in March. But either way, what? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's a weird because I feel like if they don't, on the one hand, I can understand like, okay, they have a base model Mac, and if they keep it around for another year, first of all, Touch Bar is weird. I feel like they would get rid of it because they've gotten rid of it on their more pro machines. But like, let's say hypothetically, whatever. Let's say they get rid of the touch bar, maybe they leave it, whatever. Hypothetically, having a base model that's unchanged is fine, I guess. But then if they're going to have the regular base model MacBook Pro, it almost makes you think they would keep around the base model MacBook Air, but then they're also going to launch that new colorful iMac style MacBook Air, and then there's just going to be so many laptops in there, like in that segment. It's going to be crazy.
That's true. I also have to say that's a really crowded segment. You're right. And also, why would anyone buy the MacBook Pro? Like, imagine the MacBook Air that we've all been talking about, and then put an M2 MacBook Pro next to it with a touch bar and the old design and the thick bezels, and it looks like it's from 2016. Who's going to buy that? It would be more expensive than a MacBook Air unless they're deciding to go really wild. It I that rumor is so weird that I do not believe it. I do not think I know that that is a credible source, at least with one point, right? The notch, which was not something that anyone else was really claiming and was something that they were dead right about.
Right.
But despite that, I simply do not believe that the M2 MacBook Pro would have no changes at all. If they're not going to change anything about the design, I think it would be not changing the 14-inch design. Keep that, drop the USB C port on the right. So you have two on the left, and then HDMI and SD on the right. Drop ProMotion, may probably leave mini LED, M2 chip, same exact, logic board layout, two fans, all the other parts are pretty much identical. I think that is the way to go because nobody's going to buy a 6-year-old design when the MacBook Air is there alongside it. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and like I don't even see, especially because like if you look at the current MacBook Air and the current MacBook Pro, they're essentially the same computer, right? I know
Mhm.
I know another discussion we might have had before, but they're basically the same computer, right? It's just the MacBook Pro is a fan and it has the touch bar, which, presumably is a thing of the past, but I guess we don't know. But,
Mhm.
major difference is the fan, right? So if you have these new MacBook Airs that are like super thin and colorful and they have all of this great stuff, then it's basically, you take that, which would have an M2 in it, or you take this MacBook Pro, which would have an M2 in it, and the performance difference is, maybe it's not negligible, but it's like really not that big of a difference. I don't see
Yeah.
why anyone would go for the MacBook Pro, or like, why would people would pay more, even if it was, a bit
Yeah.
less. I feel like people would
Like,
still go for the Air.
even if they cut the MacBook Pro to 1199 and then increase the MacBook Air to 1099, so they're $100 apart. Um Heck no, I'm not going to take what 10-15% more performance, but no, who needs the new design? Who needs the ability to have colors? Who needs a super thin, light, and portable design? Who needs a new speaker design? Undoubtedly. Who needs mini LED and an edge-to-edge display and MagSafe? I don't need any of that. Give me a touch bar, baby. I want it. I want a touch bar in my life. This is where it needs to be. No, nobody's gonna do that, and I want to pay $100 more for that. Yeah, let's go. That's ridiculous. And I just don't think that that makes any sense. If I had to guess, I would think that what they're looking at is validation testing for the M2 chip using parts that are already out. Because as we have talked about, Apple loves to split up their workforce. They love to have people working on components without knowing what the whole thing is. I mean, when you look at the Apple keynote, there's a reason why a different person comes on stage to talk about each different aspect of it. It's because they probably don't even know what the other guys are talking about. Like when you see the Apple people talking about the new sound design, they probably had zero idea what chip was going in that machine. Guaranteed. They had no idea. They were told, "Hey, here's our form factor. We need some cool sound for it." Um it's I think highly likely that what happened here was the information that Mac Rumors saw was old. Almost all of the Apple leaks that you see come from the supply chain. Apple employees are locked down tight. If you work for Apple and you're leaking, you're probably not going to work for Apple for very long because they are pretty good at stopping that. But when you're talking about a factory, that is a lot harder to control because oftentimes the employees of these factories are just as excited about Apple products as you and I. And so when they see something new, oh my god, if imagine being in that situation. Imagine you're someone who's a fan of technology, and you're working on it, and you're like, oh my god, that's the new iPhone. And then you have an NDA, you have probably very terrible working conditions that are pretty taxing on you, and you're just sitting there like, I want to talk about this. I want to show someone this. And so that's where a lot of the stuff comes from. But you also have to keep in mind that because it's not coming from Apple directly, we don't know what to make of it. Apple doesn't really put any sort of labeling on it. When you see all these leaked designs, they're not marked as Apple products in any way in most cases, because that's one way to obfuscate what you're doing. So I guess that was a very long-winded way of saying I don't believe this leak.
I think that's a good, the idea that it was like, validation testing and they put the M2 in the existing hardware. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, you could look at like the developer testing kit for Apple Silicon, which was the A12Z in a
Mm-hmm.
Mac Mini body. And, obviously
Yeah.
A12Z is, an iPad chip in a Mac Mini body. So I could definitely see, the chip team who's working on the M2, they're probably the majority of them don't know what computer it's actually going into. They just know that they're working on the
Mm-hmm.
next generation of Apple Silicon. And so, yeah, they're going to use the existing hardware to test it because that's what they have. It makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. Working on a
I
different
actually
timeline.
have firsthand proof of that. A year ago, I made a video about a prototype MacBook that I bought. Now, this was a much older one. This is from 2014, but one of the things that I found really interesting about it is that the MacBook Pro that I had, the one that I bought, is an early red board prototype. So in the early days of Apple's uh, testing, they use red logic boards, but it was a prototype for the mid 2015 MacBook Pro, which introduced the Force Touch trackpad to the MacBook Pro. In 2015, the 12-inch MacBook and then the 13 and 15-inch MacBook Pros all came out with Force Touch. So this was one of the devices that they were using to develop the Force Touch trackpad. But the specs of the machine were identical to a base model 2013 MacBook Pro. So if that were to get out there, that would be a confusing headline. That would be like, so Apple's planning a new revision with a haptic touch trackpad, but unchanged specifications. But as we know, that's not what happened because things are developed in stages. So that, I guess, would be yet further proof of taking this one with a grain of salt.
Yeah, definitely agree there.
Oh, you know what, Noah? I did have something else. This is a little bit separate from the discussion about the upcoming Apple event, but I did want to address here our resident sugar daddy, Cole Weathers, with another super chat here, um, prompted us thoughts on Tim Cook and Russia. And I guess it's sort of hard to host a podcast in this current, week of the year without addressing what's going on. And I, we don't have to get too into it. We're not, a geopolitical podcast, but something that was very poignant that stuck with me today was, you may remember, Noah, Clean My Mac, MacPaw.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with them a couple of times. They actually sponsored my initial review video of the M1 Pro MacBooks back in October. And they are based in Ukraine. And so I got an email from them today that was essentially saying, like, it's very hard for us to operate right now because we're literally being invaded, and they're pledging to keep the services operational, which is really astounding. I mean, I cannot imagine, actively being invaded and I'm still keeping my business running. I'd be more focused on running, and they had links to support the Ukrainian military and stuff like that. I was like, wow, that is, I guess it's probably a selfish and like very US oriented mindset, but it was like, wow, that's a really personal, direct link to hear from the the rep that I've been working with, emailing presumably a larger group of people saying like, this is what's going on. It was such a personal link to that situation that I was like, wow, that it really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's a great anecdote to share. And I'll share one a little bit less personal, but the company JetBrains makes IDEs, integrated development environments, like
Mm,
IntelliJ, for example. And I use JetBrains IDEs every day, both for my personal projects and for work. I think that they're the best IDEs, the best programs for writing code, basically. And they are based in Russia. And they tweeted, which I
mm,
pulled up the tweet. They said, "As JetBrains, we condemn the attacks taking place. Our hearts are with the Ukrainian people, including our own colleagues and their families," which I thought was very bold of like a Russian-based company to tweet something
mm.
like that. So I wanted to
Very.
give them some respect for that as well.
Yeah, huge respect for that because in Russia, I mean, it's easy to see Russia as the bad guy. I think it's more productive to see Putin as the bad guy because you're really talking about the very upper reigns of power making this decision, and by and large, the Russian people, at least from what I can tell, are really not behind this. And it's hard for them to say that because, I mean, we've seen the footage of people trying to protest getting thrown into vans and taken off. Um, it's really, I mean, it's a really very perplexing situation. It's a very heartbreaking situation. I think honestly, it seems like Ukraine is doing an absolutely bang up job of defending themselves, of standing true, keeping up the good fight. And I mean, just the fact that MacPaw is still going at it, and they're like they were talking about how their support team was gonna still try to get back to people. I'm like, if I were in that situation, I would not be like, here in the capital city of the US in Washington DC with like Russians surrounding us and invading. I would not be sitting here like, let me film a video on a MacBook real quick. I would be like, sorry, see you guys. I'm out of here.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, it's definitely, as far as the war goes, it seems like it's more with Russia, it's more the people at the very top and not the average.
Yeah.
Because like, even the average even the soldiers that are going off and fighting, a lot of them I don't think necessarily agree. But before we move on, I guess maybe to address Cole's question more head on, there
Sure.
was a call. I think there was a call from Ukraine to Tim Cook to cut off the App Store in Russia as, I guess,
Mm.
like another sanction, essentially. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm not super up to date on that, but I think it would make sense. I think um if Apple truly wants to be, all about freedom and privacy, I think that is a fairly non controversial step to take. I mean, we saw Elon Musk was requested to bring Starlink access to Ukraine, and within a couple of hours, I think he was like, "All right, you got it."
Hmm.
Um, not to pat Elon on the back too much. I feel like that's a pretty simple step, but I think for Apple, it's also a pretty simple step. I think I think they can afford in this particular situation to back democracy. They have plenty of cash on hand, and I really don't think it's going to hurt them more than it would help the people of Ukraine. So, yeah, I would say, have they done it yet? Because if they haven't, what the heck are they waiting for? That's a really dumb timeline to make.
Yeah, I haven't heard that they've done it, but the main argument that I've heard against it is that it might affect the citizens of Russia more than it would affect the people in power who are, what they're really. And you
That's
could say that
true.
about, any sanction, I guess, but maybe this particularly,
Mhm.
especially if you're cutting off the ability for people to, disseminate information or like contact other people, it can be, that could be another effect that comes out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. There's been a lot of discussion about, like, as in regards to sanctions, like, at what point are you imposing sanctions on Putin, or are you imposing sanctions on the people of Russia who seemingly by and large don't support that, right? So I think that's a good point. Um, and it would be it. So I guess what it comes down to is Russian citizens aren't, the enemy here, right? You're talking about Putin being the enemy. So how do you stop Putin? Well, realistically and unfortunately, there are going to have to be sanctions that affect more than just Putin because, in regards to the App Store, like, what are they going to block at Vladimir Putin _1 from downloading TikTok? Okay, not really, not really the most applicable thing, right? So I think one of the goals with sanctions, and I think you could make this argument more easily with like banking than with the App Store, would be that if you essentially tank the economy and like get people really mad at Putin, being like, "Why are you doing this? Everyone's cutting us off. This is your fault." That those are the type of factors that can be motivational to ending a conflict or de-escalating a conflict. Um, but I think that does apply more with something like banking, which hits the high up oligarchs and the really really rich inner circle more so than with the app store. But I don't know, maybe as a temporary thing, doing that as a means to even just preventing Russian soldiers from communicating. I don't know. I imagine there's a lot of iPhone users on the Russian military. That could be like a little wrench in the system. I don't know. We're not really qualified to talk about this in all honesty.
Yeah, yeah, definitely true. But I guess, yeah, and then some people are saying, maybe some people would lose trust in Apple to know that they could, cut off access to the App Store at some point. And I think these are kind of extenuating circumstances. But
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
regardless, I guess that's a point that you can think about. So yeah, we're not super qualified to talk about this, but I think that um, you know, Tim, they're gonna do first of all whatever is required by law, right? So if there are sanctions that are placed and they apply to technology companies, then obviously it's gonna happen. And beyond that, um, maybe Apple will do something maybe regarding the sale of their products, or the App
Mhm.
Store, or whatever it's gonna be. But I guess we'll have to see what happens there.
One thing I will say based on this comment, also, how should people around the world trust Apple if they can stop the App Store from one day to another? That is what I believe we would call a slippery slope argument. And those types of arguments, I don't really think hold a lot of water because I don't know, you see this in many different applications. But really, if you think critically for a second, like, okay, how are we supposed to trust Apple if we know they have the power to just snap their fingers and switch something off like that? Well, first of all, this is probably the most extenuating circumstance you can imagine, and they're still not doing it. So it's hard to imagine that they would just be like, I have just decided that you get no app store. Haha. Smite. Smite. Like, the whole thing with slippery slope arguments is there's no accounting for motivation.
Mm.
It was the same thing if you go back to, what was it, 2015, in the case of the San Bernardino iPhone,
Hmm.
where the government wanted access to the iPhone. And I think a lot of people that were against Apple giving access used some slippery slope arguments. I think that was a case where Apple was right not to create the backdoor, but not for the reason that some people said. Do you remember that whole discussion, Noah?
I do remember. I remember some of that was going on. Yeah.
And a lot of the fear was kind of like, oh no, if Apple hacks into the phone for the government, then that means that Apple could hack into any phone or the government could get into all of your stuff. And that can be a slippery slope argument, which is based on a kernel of truth. So Apple doesn't have the motivation to start going around hacking people's phones willy nilly or giving the government, carte blanche, complete access into iPhones. But the big fear, I think, there was if you create a method for defeating iPhone security, then it's not necessarily a matter of, oh, Apple's going to abuse that or even the government's going to abuse that. But if it exists and someone finds it who shouldn't find it, that's legitimately frightening. And that's not a slippery slope argument. That's like a covering your corners argument, right? If you're saying, oh, Apple blocks the App Store, maybe they're just going to start blocking the App Store everywhere. Well, they don't want to do that. They make money off the App Store. Why would they block it? They don't even want to remove the scammy apps that have like $100, little coins that you can buy. There's no motivation for them to do any of that. But there is a motivation for some hacker person to exploit a backdoor that's government mandated and wreak havoc. I think that's a pretty key thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, like, theoretically, Apple could, like the App Store is wholly controlled by Apple. Like they could take it down if they really wanted to, and there's nothing you could do about it regardless. But like
True.
obviously they're not going to because it makes them money. So I agree there. But whether they should take it down or not is a tricky subject. Probably not super qualified to give a nuanced response, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Never trust anyone, even when you trust them. That's an interesting comment. And that's exactly why I don't trust Noah because my goodness, the guy's always getting himself into lawsuits. And I'm afraid that he's going to try to provoke me into suing him. And I'm just not financially prepared to bring a whole team of lawyers on board.
Do you think you're gonna lose, or do you think you would lose?
See, look, now you're goading me into another lawsuitish situation. My goodness.
I mean, if you win, then I would have to pay for your lawyer fees. So if you think you're gonna win, then you should
But you've
just do
got
it.
all the see what you're doing here is you've got all the experience because as we all know from last week, you have been intentionally getting everyone to sue you. I mean, you had to move 3,000 miles across the country because you've litigated everyone on the East Coast. I'm not going to go up against that. My goodness. That's just
But
absurd. So, I'm not going to fall for it, Noah. I'm not suing you. It's not going to happen.
I have gotten some very expensive lessons, we'll say. So
Well, I
I
think
don't.
you've more than made up for it. All of these
Yeah.
shady deals and settlements that you've been up to.
Well, that's a private matter.
That's fair. I suppose I shouldn't air your dirty laundry because you've been doing that plenty well yourself in every courtroom you can find. All right. Let's talk about that Apple event again because, oh, yeah, the iPhone SE. This is one of those rumors that I every once in a while I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing. I know we've talked about it. I just don't like it. That's my take. I don't like the if the rumors are true, which they might be, they might not be. Seems like they might be. I don't like that. The iPhone 8 design still are we come on. It's a little bit it's a little bit much, don't you think, at this point?
Yeah, I feel like yeah, because I know when we talked about this, we were looking at I think the latest rumor that I had seen, which might be a little bit old by now, was that this year we were still getting the same design, and the next year was going to be like an iPhone 11 looking design for the SE. And the rumor was maybe the iPhone 11 style this year, but I think the latest rumor that I saw was pointing towards, same design again. And
I'm so tired of it.
yeah, I mean it's the iPhone 6 design. So it's been yeah, it's quite literally the iPhone 6 design. And then like what's different? The home button isn't even a button anymore. And then is the camera even no, it's still one camera, right? On the back.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. Dude, oh my god. See, okay, price-wise, it's good. It's fine. The iPhone SE, it's not like I want, you know, the freaking telephoto lens on it or titanium housing like oh, I want ProMotion on the iPhone SE for $300 or I'm going to throw a hissy fit. Like we're realistic here. But the single rear camera, which by the way is the same camera component after however many years, it's crazy. The single front facing camera, Touch ID, no Face ID, those bezels, and most importantly, the same battery from 5 years ago. Ugh. The iPhone SE, the only problem with it, besides being a little outdated, but I'll even take the outdatedness, it's the gosh dang battery. It's not enough for a modern piece of technology. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah, I know the battery has definitely been a rough spot. And obviously, um, yeah, like as the hardware gets more powerful, you put a newer chip in there
Mhm.
and more like obviously the software is the big one. You put more and more software features on there, and that's going to drain the battery more. And I think the other thing that I have with the design is it's an old design, but it is quickly looking older and older. So if you look at like the
Mm.
iPhone 12, which introduced the flat sides, right? Oh no.
Oh no! The wall panels are shedding.
That might have been really loud in the recording, so we'll take care of that. But
It
I think
didn't
it's time to
sound too
change out the
bad to
tape.
me.
That's good. I need to change out the tape on those wall panels. But the design of the thing, right? So now we have flat sides on all the iPhones except for the SE. And then also, you talked about the bezels, and on the 13, the notch got even smaller. On the 14, it's looking like we're getting maybe a hole punch. So even smaller if you want to
Hmm.
think about it like that. Notch, the bezels on the SE are still staying the same. So I think it's an old design, and it's like if you put it next to the iPhone 11, right, versus putting it next to the iPhone 13, there's an
Yeah.
even bigger difference. So it's quickly that design is quickly getting even old, like older much quicker, and it's already very old.
You know what I this is weird. Sorry, this is totally unrelated, but I just saw something that made me wonder. A couple of days ago, I tweeted, I'm trying to find out um when was this? Okay. I'm on Twitter. I hate when when you need to go and find an old tweet. It's the worst thing in the world. You can't search. You just have to keep on scrolling like an idiot. They really should do something about that. Um what was Okay, don't worry about this. I can't think of the word. I'm like imagining the tweet and I'm command effing on this page That sounds weird. Command effing. Oh god. I feel like I'm losing my mind a little bit here.
Oh,
What did
jeez.
I freaking tweet about? I basically tweeted about how someone at Twitter must hate me because they refuse to verify me. They won't enable tips or super follows or like any of the special features. Not that I care. I don't want you guys to tip me or super follow me unless you want to. I don't know. You do whatever you want. Cole Weathers probably will, but Twitter won't enable it. And I tweeted about that. And then within like the same 48 hours of me tweeting that, I got an email and they were like, hey, super follows are now enabled. Oh, I found it. Okay. So this email, welcome to super follows, February 23rd at 3:44 p.m. When I tweeted, someone at Twitter must hate me because I can't do tips or super follows and I don't get checkmark vanity symbol. I tweeted that on February 21st. So 48 hours later, they were like, all right, now's the time. Do you know when I submitted because you had to like do the request thing to do super follows? Do you know when I submitted that?
When?
The day it came out.
When was that?
Like 10 months ago, something like that. It was a long time ago. And you're telling me it's a coincidence that I tweeted that someone at Twitter might hate me, and then 48 hours later, here you go. They're watching. I'm telling you.
I think that there's someone at Twitter that hates you and someone at Twitter that loves you, and they're constantly like at war with
At
each other.
war. Yes.
Yeah.
This is so true. That has to be it. So my Twitter angel won out that day.
Yeah, your Twitter devil was winning for a long time, but then the angel swooped
Yes.
in and won that one.
Unfortunately, the angel, I thank you, Twitter angel. I really appreciate what you've done for me. But of the three things that could have been done, you did the wrong one. I didn't really care about the super follows and I didn't really care about the tips. I just want the vanity symbol, okay? I want that check mark. All right? I don't know. Twitter, what do you want from me, okay? Like, not to sound gauche, but I have 39,700 followers. That's, I'm not trying to claim any sort of fame here, but that's a respectable number. I've seen, about 7 million people with far fewer followers than me that get verified for no apparent reason. Just to say, also a lot of bots. A lot of bots get verified, but I can't. Not to sound like I'm complaining because that would be so blasé, but give me the vanity symbol. I want it.
Yeah, I don't know. And there's been some parody accounts as well. Some of them have been very clear that they're parody accounts, some of them a little bit less so.
Yeah.
But there have
And I
been
like them
parody
all.
accounts.
I think they're all very funny, but there have been legitimate situations. Luke Miana on Twitter, which, by the way, if any of you are involved in this Twitter drama, I genuinely don't know who that is. It's not me. A lot of people are like, credit to whoever it is. They are one, extremely dedicated, two, very funny, and three, have fooled a lot of people into thinking that I'm secretly running that account, but I'm not. And a lot of people were like, see those tweets because I interact with them, and a lot of people they get like a lot of likes. They get like hundreds and sometimes thousands of likes. Look, we already have a Luke Miana stan here in the chat, right? People know this guy, and I will continuously read through replies, and I'm like, oh, that person thinks it's me. They're like, when's the next video dropping? He doesn't know. If only there were a means of reducing confusion via a little symbol, hear me out, that would signify the legitimacy of one account over another.
Hmm.
I don't know if such a thing exists.
It's a very bold idea, but
Now that's a bold idea. Cole Weathers said, "Date someone at Twitter." I'm gonna have to break up with my girlfriend and pursue this because that seems like it would be worth it. At the end of the day, getting that vanity badge.
oh yeah, that's a great reason to like start a romantic relationship.
Babe, it's not you. It's Twitter. I want to
It's
get
the check
verified
mark.
on Twitter. So I have to pursue my dream of being verified on Twitter, which means I have to go and court someone at Twitter, whoever it may be.
But you got to make sure that whoever it is actually has the power to give you the check mark. Because like you could put months or years into a relationship only to find out
Mm.
that they can't give you the check mark, and then it would be a whole waste of time.
So there we go. This comment then, or your girlfriend could get a job at Twitter. That's an interesting angle because then, you're not trying to forge a phony relationship. You're trying to essentially plant a spy. And maybe they don't have to be that high up. Maybe it could just be a little something subtle, right? Like she could get some C-suite job, nothing too
Yeah.
crazy, not like grand czar of verifications, which I'm sure exists, but maybe they could like be near the czar every once in a while, brush up against some high-ranking people, and just sort of be like, "Oh, you hear about that Luke Miani thing? Oh, I can never tell which account is his." Just those little snippets of dialogue. "Oh, that Luke Miani guy makes some really cool videos. Too bad I can't find him on Twitter because he must be verified, but all the accounts seem to be fake because they're not verified." Just those little things that could totally sway them, I think.
That's an interesting theory. I was thinking, perhaps infiltrate even simpler,
Mm.
become, janitor or like
Oh.
a maintenance person, for example. And then once you can get into the building, then you can get to the room where they house the verification machine, right? It's this
Of
big
course.
giant
Yeah.
computer size of a whole
Mhm.
room, and you just type in a username and it assigns the badge. That's how the verification works, in case you didn't know that.
Yeah,
And
you
so as
have
long as
like these little cards and you punch holes in them and then it
right.
feeds them into these big and it's like big tapes that go round and
Mhm.
round. Yeah. And it makes like a lot of blooping sounds and like
Uh-huh.
little LED lights um with no discernible pattern or meaning behind them, but they look very technology. That's how it works. It uses all of those things.
Yeah, that's how people get verified. And that's why they're slow to verify, because it's a very arduous process to
Yeah.
verify someone on Twitter. But, get someone who has access to the building outside of work hours, and maybe you
Mm.
could sneak a punch card in there. I don't know. I'm just putting that out
Sneak
there.
the old Luke Miani punch card right into the verification machine. That's a pretty good idea. Crack the enigma, if you will, of
Mm.
that is the verification machine. I like this plan. I think we're gonna have to get work. In fact, I think having a two-pronged strategy. So I can pursue sort of janitorial roles and gaining access to the verification machine. Meanwhile, my girlfriend can sort of go for the corporate espionage aspect of it and sort of the whisperings in the ears and whatnot.
Right, and then whichever one works, works. And I like to propose actually that we make it a three-pronged approach. And the third
Oh,
prong would be that I end this podcast episode, since we're now at time.
oh, an interesting approach. I hadn't really thought of that, but now that you mention it, I have been your host, Luke Miani.
And I've been your host, Noah Rubin. Hope you have a great
You
night.
sure have. And we sure hope that you have a good night. So, yeah.